Real freedom was not a speech. It was a lunch line. It was steam rising from tin trays and the clatter of utensils in a mess hall where two American uniforms shared the same table and the same loaf of bread. Anna Kovacs saw it first. She was 23, a Red Cross typist turned conscript courier captured near Debrecen, and now riding through Pennsylvania in a military bus with the windows cracked for air. When the guards marched them into the depot canteen, she froze. A black sergeant and a white corporal were shoulder to shoulder, laughing at something scribbled on a napkin. They broke cornbread and passed it without a second thought. Anna did not breathe. In Hungary, such a sight would have started a fight or a whispering campaign before it started a riot. Here, it caused no more disturbance than the hiss of the coffee urn. They nudged her forward. The line moved. The sergeant noticed the grey dresses marked PW and lifted two fingers in a casual salute that said, "I see you, and I do not hate you." Anna's mouth answered before her mind did. "Hello?" Her English was schoolbook thin, but the word came out warm. He grinned and tapped the table twice, a rhythm that matched the clink of metal plates. "Real freedom," he said to his friend, not to her, not as an announcement or an argument, simply as a fact that lived in the way he sat where he pleased. The POW escort, a young lieutenant from Ohio, with a polite voice and a face still baby-soft despite the pistol on his hip, kept the women moving. "This is just a stop, ladies. Hot meal, then back on the road. Camp Morton is another 2 hours." His tone was matter-of-fact. He had said the same sentence to Italians last month and Germans the week before, and its edges had been worn smooth by repetition. But to Anna and to Zsófi and to Eva and to the others whose eyes roved the room as if it were a cathedral full of surprises, every syllable was a bell. They ate facing the windows. Outside, freight trains dragged war across a continent of rails. Inside, 2 tables over, 4 service members traded jokes without the choreography of separation. The white corporal refilled the sergeant's coffee, then handed the pot to a private with skin like polished walnut who poured for a nurse with copper hair and freckles. No one announced the meaning of the arrangement. No chaplain cleared his throat to declare it progress. It simply was. That was the shocking part, not the novelty, the normal. Zsófi leaned close. "Are they allowed to do that?" Anna whispered back. Her vocabulary lacked the words for prejudice and policy, so she reached for the only question that mattered. "Is the rule written down somewhere that says yes or no?" Anna shrugged. The rule here seemed to be gravity. People sat. Coffee flowed. Conversation found the lowest places and filled them, and the world did not crack. When the bus door clapped shut and the depot slipped behind, the talk inside the POW compartment swelled. They demanded a theory. Perhaps these were Northerners who believed unusual things. Perhaps they were pretending for visitors. Perhaps the officers would stop them at the next whistle stop. The Ohio lieutenant listened and finally said the most dangerous sentence a soldier can hear. "Maybe it is more complicated than you think." The road unrolled. The sky widened. The women stared at the America outside and tried to decide whether it was a story or a place. Camp Morton sat among low hills and weathered barns, a quilt of fields stitched with hedgerows and stone. The gate was plain. The watchtowers were not tall enough to feel theatrical. When the bus pulled in, a black military policeman checked the roster while a white sergeant counted heads. They compared numbers, nodded in sync, and waved the group forward. The gesture was unremarkable. The meaning landed like thunder. Check in, disinfect, issue bedding. The day moved on rails. Late afternoon, they were taken to the dining hall. Anna braced herself for the return to the world she understood, the one where the doorway split a room like a border and told you who you were. Instead, she stepped into a hum of trays and voices where the uniforms ate together, and the only barrier was the counter that separated hungry from food. She felt her throat tighten. It surprised her that she was relieved. Relief tastes like water after marching, like the first soft breeze in an airless room. At the far end, a chaplain blessed the meal in a voice so steady it felt like a hand on the shoulder. Our men rolled over the tables and plates. The cooks, men with sleeves damp to the elbow, ladled stew with the patience of craftsmen. A black cook teased a white private for taking extra bread. The private grinned and handed the extra slice to the woman behind Anna on the line. She blinked at him, then tucked it into her pocket the way you hide treasure when you do not yet trust you are allowed to have it. "Eat," said the guard at Anna's elbow. She obeyed. The stew tasted like everything she wanted to believe about this place. Salt, fat, time. She had no politics that she trusted anymore. What she had was evidence. Evidence looked like a shared condiment. Evidence looked like laughter that did not require permission. Evidence looked like the absence of a rule she had been taught to fear. She glanced up and found the sergeant from the depot watching. He raised his cup. She touched her spoon to her plate in answer. Two small sounds in a loud room, a quiet treaty signed with broth. After dinner, they were issued blankets and shown to their barracks. In the doorway, a poster listed camp expectations in plain language. No fighting, no contraband. Work details posted at dawn. Another sign, a homemade one in a neat hand, stood beside it. No insults about a man's birth. The word choice was old-fashioned. The message was sharp. Anna stood reading until the line behind her growled and pushed. Lights out came with the speed of a falling curtain, but sleep did not. The room breathed. Mice scurried somewhere under the floorboards. A train called to another train across a valley of night. In the bunk above, Eva whispered the question they had all been humming since noon. What kind of country lets enemies watch its contradictions in daylight? Anna thought of the depot table. She thought of the guard's mild voice, of the cook's joking patience, of the poster that was both rule and wish. One that does not fear its own mirror, she said, surprising herself. Morning washed the room in a hard white clarity. The women lined up for roll call. The lieutenant from Ohio was there again, along with the military policeman from the gate. They exchanged a joke about the rain that was threatening and the ball game it might spoil. The friendship in their voices had the weight of routine. When the Hungarian names were done, the MP nodded to Anna. "Good morning, Mum." The word Mum landed like a medal pinned by a smiling enemy. She answered in careful English. "Good morning, sir." He laughed, not at her, but with the joy of hearing a flower of manners grow in gravel. Work detail paired the women with civilian canners at a nearby factory. The trucks came after breakfast, bouncing on ruts. Anna rode beside the MP at the back, wind in her face, the road throwing dust that tasted like chalk. The factory floor smelled of tomatoes and hot tin. Supervisors, both black and white, greeted the group with the same bored efficiency of people who care more about the shift clock than the war. Homefront had no time for theatre. It needed hands. On break, Anna found herself at a picnic table with a black welder and a white driver, both still in their grease armor from the morning's labor. The driver offered her a cigarette. She did not smoke, but she took it to be polite. The welder struck a match and cupped it so the wind could not steal it. Their arms touched for a heartbeat as they shielded the flame. No one flinched. Anna felt again that inner click, the soft sound of a door unlocking where she had thought there was only a wall. She asked the driver if the rules here were new. He shrugged. Some places are one way, some are another. You get used to the people you trust. The welder nodded, and sometimes you just get tired of nonsense. He exhaled a ribbon of smoke that wrote its own brief declaration in the air before the breeze erased it. Anna thought of laws and proclamations, of maps redrawn with rulers. Here the border seemed to run through the human heart, and people crossed it by habit, not by orders. When the shift ended, the trucks carried them back toward Camp Morton under a sky that had cleaned itself with rain. The fields shone, the road steamed. In the rearview mirror, the MP watched the women through friendly eyes. "You know what I think you saw yesterday," he said at last. "You saw a promise being practiced, not fulfilled, not perfect, practiced." He pointed to the puddles spinning off the tires. "It is like learning to drive on mud. You slide, you correct. The point is, you do not stop." The camp mess was loud again that evening. The same table at the far wall held the same pair of friends. The white corporal had a bandage on his knuckle and a grin that suggested he had scraped it doing something foolish but brave. The black sergeant teased him about it until both were wheezing. Anna watched, less shocked now and more curious. Curiosity is the gateway to loyalty. It makes room for patience. It quiets the voice that demands verdicts before it has gathered facts. Later, in the fading light, the chaplain held a brief service on the grass. He read from a small book in a voice that did not push. He chose a line about welcoming strangers. The audience was a mix of guards and prisoners and factory workers who had wandered over on their way home. A child chased a moth through the gathered legs. No one scolded. The moth flew free. The child laughed. The chaplain closed the book and seemed satisfied that the reading had been illustrated by the world itself. Back in the barracks, the women talked of families and of the rooms they had left behind. They traded recipes from villages that had already become rumors. When the conversation circled back to the site that had started the day's astonishment, the tone had shifted, less fear, more mapping. Eva said, "I think we have been kept like people in a cellar, told that the street is full of monsters. And then you open the door and find neighbors trading sugar through an open window." Anna smiled. "And you find they are arguing over the same small things you argue about. How to season the stew, who hogs the blanket, who tells the better joke." That night, the wind rose. The barracks creaked. Rain ticked the roof. Anna slept and dreamed she was back in a Budapest cafe, where the radio murmured and the spoons chimed, and the door was open to a street where people moved without choreography. When she woke just before dawn, she lay still and listened to the new country breathe around her. The word for it had arrived in her mind, without announcement. Not victory, not even peace. Practice. If you want more stories that pull history out of the footnotes and set it on a table where we can all examine it, like this video and subscribe, and share this with a friend who loves stirring true tales. Drop a comment with the city you are watching from so we can shout you out in the next episode. The second week at Camp Morton unfolded like a lesson written on a chalkboard that refused to stay clean. Each day erased some certainty and left a smudge that looked more like a face. Anna learned the rhythm of reveille and the shape of chores. She learned that the mess crew needed bodies who could carry, scrub, and ladle without complaint. She volunteered, not because she loved scalding water and pots big enough to drown a sheepdog, but because the kitchen was where the world came together with an appetite. On her first shift, she stood elbow to elbow with a cook named Willis, who had a smile that showed a gold tooth and a voice that made jokes sound like hymns. He set a crate of onions between them and passed her a knife. "Do not chase the onion," he said. "Let it come to you." He showed her how to curl her fingers, how to make each cut the same width without measuring. "Discipline," he said, "is not only for marches, it is for stew." Across the line, A white corporal with ginger hair stirred a vat of beans that smelled like patience. He and Willis argued about baseball with a tender ferocity that made Anna think of sisters quarreling over the last plum. When the argument reached a crescendo, Willis pinched a bit of salt and dropped it into the beans, then said to the corporal, "You are wrong as a man who salts before he tastes." The corporal laughed, tasted, and nodded, and the matter was settled without a judge. By midday, the kitchen throbbed like a heart. Guards drifted in and out. Prisoners moved under the eyes of men who were tired but not cruel. Anna carried trays, ladled soup, learned the balance of a full pot, so she did not slop the rim and waste a drop. When the door opened for the lunch rush, she felt a tremor of the shock that had shaken her in the depot. The same mingling, the same casual exchange, the same absence of scolding signs. A black sergeant and a white medic traded half a sandwich. One preferred mustard, the other preferred pickles. They built a whole out of two halves. It looked like a lesson in civics disguised as lunch. During a pause, the Ohio lieutenant leaned on the doorframe and watched the line snake and ebb. He said to no one in particular, "In this room we can almost hear the war quiet down." Willis answered without looking up, "That is because a full mouth does not shout." The lieutenant smiled and left them to their work. After the wash-up, Anna escaped to the yard for 5 minutes of air. The sky had a way of being enormous here, even on ordinary days. The camp band, a ragtag clutch of musicians who had scavenged brass and drumsticks from supply, began to rehearse near the flagpole. The drummer was black, the trumpeter white, the clarinetist, a woman from New Jersey who had played in church basements since she was 12. They worked through a tune that insisted on happiness. People gathered, first a few, then a crowd. Feet tapped. A guard clapped on the wrong beat, and no one corrected him. Correction would have spoiled the mood. Sophie slipped beside Anna and whispered, "Do they not have rules about who plays with whom?" Anna shook her head. Here the rules appear to bend toward the easiest way of making something good. Sophie nodded slowly. "That is a rule I could serve without fear." In the late afternoon, the chaplain held an English class for the prisoners who wanted it. The blackboard said pronouns and permission. He wrote we and they, then drew a bridge between them. "Language is a way to cross," he said. "Practice makes the crossing less frightening." Eva raised a hand and asked if permission was the same as invitation. The chaplain rubbed his chin. An invitation is a door that opens. Permission is the absence of a lock. Both can be misused, both can be refused, but a wise house keeps both near the table. On the third day in the kitchen, Willis gave Anna a small task that felt like a medal. "Take the coffee to table 6, he said, with that look that says, "I trust you not to spill truth on the way." Table 6 was the corner where the black sergeant and the ginger corporal held court. She approached with the metal pot, the cups stacked on a tray, the smell rising like a friendly fog. The sergeant grinned. "Miss Anna, look at you, a saint with a sacred vessel." The corporal touched the brim of his cap. "Ma'am." She poured for them, then for the nurse who had freckles and tired eyes, then for a private whose hands shook until the first sip calmed them. The sergeant asked her where she was from. "Not the nation," he said, "the street." When she answered, he nodded as if he knew the corner store and the landlord's dog. He told her he came from a block where the stoops were a neighborhood parliament, and the fire hydrant in August was a fountain for republics of children. The corporal said his home was a town with one movie house and 2 churches, both of which held pie socials, as if sugar could keep the planet turning. They spoke across the line of coffee cups like engineers trumping a river with talk until the bridge appeared. Weeks slid by. The kitchen became a school. Anna learned what to do when a pot burned. You move it off the flame, scrape the bottom with sorrow, start again with a softer heat and more patience. She learned how to quiet a quarrel by giving both men something heavy to carry. She learned to tell when laughter was a lid on a pot that wanted to boil over. With each shift, the shock of that first lunch did not fade so much as deepen. The thing that had startled her now asked questions that followed her to her bunk. One evening, a visiting officer from another post arrived, a man with hard eyes and starch in his voice. He stood in the doorway and frowned at the room. He said, in a tone that made Anna's neck prickle, that he had seen other arrangements in other places. Willis stirred his pot without looking up. He said softly, "Sir, here we cook for the fight we want, not the fight we found." The Ohio lieutenant, wiser than his age, stepped between the officer and the room with a smile that had steel inside it. He steered the man toward the office with talk of paperwork and weather. The band picked up a tune. The cooks doubled the pepper in the stew. The moment passed, not without cost, but without surrender. On Sundays, the factory was quiet, so the women were allowed to attend a baseball game on the far field. It was not one team against another so much as a mosaic. The pitcher was a black sergeant with a curveball that bent laws of motion. The catcher was a white mechanic who cussed like a poet. Out in right field, a nurse shaded her eyes with a glove that had seen decades. The stands were a congregation. Children ran the foul line. Soldiers in recovery leaned canes on the bench. A chaplain kept score with the seriousness of a court clerk. Anna sat with Zsuzsófi and Ava on the top row, where the wind could turn a sigh into something like a song. She tried to reconcile this with the maps in her head. She had been told that lines between people were fixed like rivers. Here the lines were chalk on dirt. A slide erased them. A rain redrew them in the afternoon. A groundskeeper came out with a rake and made them straight again, not because the lines owned the field, but because the game needed them to start. Between innings, the sergeant came over with a grin and tossed Anna a ball. She fumbled and laughed. He said, "It takes a while to learn how to catch the good that is thrown at you." The day the letter arrived from home, Anna took it to the mess and sat where the light was kind. The envelope was thin as a prayer. Her brother had written. He was alive, he was hungry, he was afraid. He asked whether America was made of stories or of true. She read the page twice, then a third time, then folded it small and tucked it near her heart. Willis saw the tremor in her hands and poured her coffee without speech. The ginger corporal left a biscuit at her elbow with the offhand grace of a man who understands that food can carry words your mouth does not know how to shape. That night, Anna wrote back with a pencil worn to a nub. She told her brother about a kitchen where the argument about salt had more heat than the argument about skin. She told him about a band that stitched tunes out of brass and breath. She told him about a baseball diamond where chalk lines helped people agree on what counted as fair, even when they fell short elsewhere. She did not pretend that all was solved. She wrote the word practice and underlined it with her fingernail, leaving a groove she could feel even when the light failed. As summer ripened, the factory posted a notice. They wanted 2 of the Hungarian women for the night shift canning peaches. The pay would go to the camp fund, but the hours would bring a kind of privacy that daylight does not allow. Anna and Ava were chosen. On their first night, the loading dock smelled like sugar and thunder. Lightning stitched the far hills. Inside, the line ran under lamps that made the fruit glow like little suns. The crew was a braid of people, veterans on limited duty, locals who needed cash, prisoners who preferred work to worry. The supervisor, a black woman with eyes like polished stone, ran the floor with competence that brooked no slackness and no cruelty. At 2 in the morning, when hands ached and time felt like a wheel that crushed, the supervisor called a break. She poured sweet tea into paper cups and leaned on the railing with Anna. "You look like a person who is counting," she said. "What are you measuring?" Anna considered. "Days that ring small and days that ring large," she answered. The woman nodded. "Some days are bells, some are quiet as pockets. Both can hold value if you reach into them with care." When the shift ended, dawn peeled the dark back and left a clean edge. On the walk to the trucks, a white mechanic nodded to the black supervisor and said, "Good night, boss." She saluted with her cup and said, "Good work." The exchange was practical and unadorned, the kind of respect that does not need applause. Anna tucked it beside the depot lunch in the cabinet where she kept proofs of a life she wanted to believe in. On the ride back, the Ohio lieutenant sat opposite, boots muddy, cap askew. He said, "I used to think orders were answers. Lately I think they are doors. Whether we go through together decides the shape of the room." The truck bounced. The camp appeared with its tidy lists and its sleeping roofs. Anna climbed down, body humming with fatigue and something like hope. In the weeks that followed, rumors blew in like weather. Someone had said that in a town not far off, a cafe still kept 2 doors and expected people to remember which one was theirs. Someone else said that a church had decided to share a picnic and that the potato salad had won more converts than the sermon. The world was not one thing. It was 1,000 rooms where people tried and failed and tried again. Anna carried trays and letters and thoughts. She began to understand that shock was only the first step. The second was work. One afternoon, the chaplain pinned a notice to the board near the kitchen. "Discussion tonight. Topic, what is a table?" The room filled after supper. Guards leaned on door frames. Prisoners perched on benches. The chaplain drew a rectangle on the board. He asked for definitions. A place where you set plates, a level, a battlefield, a treaty, a school, a trap, a stage. He listened, nodded, and then quietly said, "A table is a test. We see who we are by who we invite and what we share." He let the words hang. Willis folded his arms and smiled. The ginger corporal tapped his knuckles on the wood as if to say, "Amen." Anna felt the truth settle, not as a verdict, but as a path that would need to be walked again tomorrow. By autumn, the leaves around Camp Morton turned the color of rusted medals, and the air tasted of harvest. The war in Europe ended, the radio said, and then the one in the Pacific. Some prisoners cheered softly, others cried without sound. Anna listened to the broadcasts as if waiting for a command that would tell her what to feel. None came. The camp changed shape overnight. Guards relaxed. Work details became employment. The word prisoner faded from orders, replaced by worker, helper, sometimes simply by name. Freedom, she thought, was not an event. It was an accumulation of small permissions. The kitchen remained her post. Willis taught her to bake cornbread, a simple alchemy of cornmeal, milk, and heat. He said, "You feed a person bread, you feed the argument before it starts." The ginger corporal had been reassigned, but stopped by when he could, still calling her Mom, with a grin that hinted at mischief and affection both. The mess hall itself had grown quiet, like a church after revival. Soldiers went home. New faces filled the empty seats, civilian inspectors, aid workers, farmers with sunburns and tired hands. They came to learn how to turn ration into plenty again. Anna poured coffee for all of them. One day, she looked up and saw a pair of Hungarian men at the counter, fresh arrivals from another camp waiting for repatriation. They stared at her apron, her easy talk with Willis, her laughter as natural as breathing, and one of them muttered in their shared tongue, She has forgotten who she is." She pretended not to hear. Later, alone by the sink, she whispered the same words and felt them melt into something new. Maybe she had not forgotten. Maybe she had learned to be more than one thing at once. When the transport lists came, most of the women signed their names and prepared to go home. Home was a word like a cracked cup, useful but not what it had been. Anna hesitated. The chaplain found her by the garden that the prisoners had planted in the spring. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vines. He said, "You are thinking too hard again." She smiled. "It seems to be my habit." He nodded toward the horizon. "There are two kinds of return. One brings your body back to where you started. The other brings your heart forward to where it can rest. Choose the direction that lets you keep both hands open." That evening, she walked down to the river beyond the fence, now unguarded. The current was slow, catching the sunset and carrying it like a secret. A small group gathered. Willis, the lieutenant, a few others who had become friends in ways that ignored paperwork. They had built a picnic table there from scrap lumber. On it sat plates of cornbread and jars of preserves. The sergeant, who had once shared his coffee at the depot, arrived late, grinning, with a radio under his arm. Music spilled out, thin and brave, the kind of tune that could make a worn world dance again. Willis raised a glass. "To practice," he said. The others echoed. The word had become their shorthand for the work of living together without breaking apart. Anna felt the syllables settle on her tongue like communion. Practice was not perfection. It was persistence, the willingness to stay at the table even when the meal was uncomfortable. The following week, trucks came to take most of the Hungarians east toward ships and then home. Anna stayed. She had been offered a position at the canning factory, steady pay, and lodging in town. The paperwork called her civilian labor, but the truth was simpler. She had chosen to keep building the life she had glimpsed in that first shared lunch. When she stepped off the camp grounds for the last time, the gate guard, a black corporal she knew by name now, saluted her, and she saluted back. The motion felt lighter than ceremony, heavier than coincidence, a closing of one story, the start of another. Years later, she told the tale to her children in a kitchen that smelled of stew and rain. They would laugh when she described her shock, the way she had stared at a cafeteria table as if it were a miracle. She would tell them that miracles are just moments that arrive ahead of their time. Her eldest would ask, "Did you ever see him again?" The soldier from the depot. She would shake her head. "No, but I see what he showed me every day. When we sit down, all of us together, and no one checks who belongs." She kept the old camp poster framed on the wall, the one that read, "No insults about a man's birth." The edges were curled, the ink faded, but the rule still held. Visitors always noticed it and asked if it came from a movie. She would smile and say, "No, from real life, from a place where we were learning what freedom sounds like when it stops whispering and starts eating lunch." Her brother wrote once more before the Iron Curtain fell, a letter smuggled through channels that were mostly rumor. He asked if America had kept its promise. She wrote back, "It is still practicing, and so am I." The postmark blurred in the rain, but she did not mind. Practice was ongoing, so was hope. On her 50th birthday, her children surprised her with a picnic by the same river that had bordered the old camp. The table was new, the idea the same. They brought cornbread, beans, and coffee in enamel mugs. The guests came from every hue and every accent, factory workers, teachers, neighbors, even a retired lieutenant with gray hair who had driven from Ohio to see her again. He raised his cup and said, "To practice still." She laughed through tears. The river kept the toast and carried it away. As twilight deepened, fireflies stitched light across the fields. The music from a nearby porch floated on the air, a blend of fiddle and trumpet that made her think of Willis and the band and all the people who had made peace tangible one shared meal at a time. She closed her eyes and felt the world breathe as one. That was real freedom, she thought. Not flags or declarations, but the quiet miracle of sitting at the same table and knowing the food was enough for everyone. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Like this video, share it with someone who believes history still has lessons to feed us, and tell us where you're watching from. Every comment helps these forgotten chapters find their way to new tables. Thank you for being part of the story.